Hello everybody, my name's Dakota, and welcome to the first episode of whatever this video ends up being called. I have recently been looking for a new project, something that is connected to all of the things that I am sort of interested in. And I've been seeing a lot of these Inktober type lists, these Drawcembers and things like that. So I decided, what if I were to make an Inktober list where all of these words kind of embody a specific world or setting. So obviously, because this is the first video, I have my first list ready to go. I went onto Facebook, asked a bunch of friends. So I have 30 words here, all of them connecting to a world building prompt. The setting is a place called the Frozen Wastes. I wanted the feeling to be almost eldritch. Something very wrong happened here a long time ago. I wanted something that was sort of over the garden wall, but not for kids. So I think we should skip to the fun bit and actually go over the list. So I've decided to randomly select 2 of these words and pair them together as one single prompt. Gives me a little bit of a challenge. And I think for this first world building, I'm going to make it a little short. We might come back and revisit this later on, but I just want to give you guys a sort of vibe of what these videos are going to be and how these world building things are going to work. So then you guys can start getting involved in the setup as well. So we're going to go ahead and just get started with the first prompt. All right, so the first prompt is flowers and Wendigo. Now, just in case some of you might not know, a Wendigo is a sort of Native American horror creature. There's different variations from different video games and movies and different cultural stuff. But basically, it is a creature that used to be a human that becomes this horrifying monstrosity when cannibalism takes place on sacred ground. So it could be, in some cases, the person takes part in cannibalism and they become this thing. Sometimes just people taking part in cannibalism can force other people to become this thing, or being in certain areas that have been tainted by that sort of horrific event. If you're there for too long, you can turn into one of these things. I always kind of dug the idea of a Wendigo with a deer skull for a head, and it's sort of like tall, all the meat's in the torso, and its arms and legs are real long and gross, kind of like a Slender Man looking kind of thing. So that's what I went for. I've been traveling across the frozen waste for about 2 months now, and I've yet to find any of the treasure that was promised to me in Dreadmire. No gold, no forgotten artifacts, just cold, empty land covered in nothing but dangerous terrain and some of the deadliest wildlife I've ever seen. I was recently forced to change the course of my expedition to avoid any more unwanted contact with the natives of the Great Pine Forest. I keep running into what I think are their effigies, terrifying things, usually placed at the base of trees and occasionally hung from branches. Bones of animals bound together, surrounded by offerings left by those lunatics, and covered in local flora. I don't know why they would have built one all the way out here. I traveled an hour or so longer than I had any right to. It was getting dark, and I caught one of them out of the corner of my eye. Damn near shat myself. I must have missed something. Could I have accidentally wandered onto the natives' territory? I'm being followed. I didn't know what they wanted from me. I call out to them, but no one ever answers. And those awful things are everywhere. I doubled back yesterday in hopes that whoever was doing this just wanted me to leave their home. And that's when I noticed. I'm not finding more of those mannequins as I go farther into the wood. The effigies aren't different. They're the same ones I saw days ago. The effigies. They're moving. Isolation and Ghastly. So this one took me a little bit more time to come up with the idea that I wanted. So I googled some pictures of Willem Dafoe, and then I started making this guy look like Willem Dafoe. I didn't want it to get too much like The Lighthouse, so I decided that I was mostly just going to be kind of taking the Willem Dafoe face and doing some tweaks to it so it didn't look exactly like Willem Dafoe, but I'm sure by the end of this drawing you'll see that there's still like a little bit of a Willem Dafoe in there. I wanted to hit that sort of not supernatural part of it, but the sort of isolation that comes with winter and the sort of craziness that can stir up inside you when you're away from the rest of the world for way too long, and everything's very cold and dark. I wanted some kind of horrific story behind this man, something that happened to him because of the isolation, something that even though he was an old man and he had been through so many winters before, I wanted something finally got to him, something finally snapped. Normally, I don't usually draw with a whole lot of deep, dark shadows, but for this one, I kind of thought that the idea wouldn't work very well unless I got that very specific, like mid-2000s sort of creepypasta image. Through most of these prompts, I end up actually having fun with shadow and light sources a little bit more than what I'm used to. One of the sailors working on the docks was worried about an old friend who lived in the nearby lighthouse. No one had heard from him in a while, and the lighthouse itself recently went out, making it impossible for the ships in the fog to find Aldrin's docks. The people of the town feared the worst, so they sent a search party to find the old man. No one ever came back. Many people here are afraid of what this could mean. What could have found its way into that lighthouse? The men sent to investigate were no soldiers, but what creature could have killed them all? It's sad to think of what the beast could have done to that poor old man. He just wanted to live out the rest of his days in peace. His only responsibility to keep the fire at the top of that tower lit. Alright, cool. Hey everybody, this one was awful. So I had a lot of trouble with this one. I had to restart multiple times because I had an idea and I wanted it to look a very specific way, and I just could not get my hand to do what my brain wanted it to do, which happens. I mean, as an artist, this is a thing that happens very often. That does not mean that you ever get over how fucking frustrating it is. But I think the final thing, yeah, I mean, it's better than what it could have been. Could have been way worse. But it's so let me just get into it a little bit more so you guys understand. So my idea was sort of to have a creature that sort of like a shadowy creature that sort of lived inside the ice, or was only visible when light was shined through it. So I had this idea of like this guy, and he's walking through this icy cavern or something, and his light source causes this shadowy entity to sort of follow him and reflect. And the idea was that this creature sort of toys with your mind and makes you see things that you're not sure whether are real or not, just by the light kind of reflecting off the ice and bouncing off all the walls. So then after a bit of time, I decided, okay, well, I'm gonna give him like a torch or something, and because I didn't really set anything up for this world to be in any specific time period, but I definitely wanted something that wasn't specifically modern. The written prompts that I did for these drawings, it's sort of a medieval or at least old-timey vibe. So I give him a torch, and then I realized that the main idea for this prompt was the background, and I had spent little to no time on the background, but I had also not spent very much time on the guy on the front, because I was like, oh, well, the guy on the front doesn't really matter. He just needs to be there, whatever. But then I realized he takes up like 35-40% of the whole image. So I was like, okay, this guy's gone. So I ended up deleting him and bringing in the torch and started working with the creature as more of a shadow being cast from the light source, as if something was standing between the flame and the ice, but you couldn't see it. Not to say that this creature is just like an invisible creature that light source still affects. It's sort of the ice itself. It's hard to explain, but you guys get it. I had a hard time with this one. Not my favorite one, but I kind of hit it. It's the third one. Whatever. I got a better one for the last one coming. I feel it. I feel it in my bones. So get ready for that. To the far west lies a mountain range that peaks up out of the surface of the ocean, making the travel from Losdrin to the frozen wastes quite difficult. Now, the wastes are known for several things, but one of the most well-known facts is that this frostbitten hellhole is riddled with underground tunnel systems. Those mountains are no exception. If you're foolish enough to go looking for one of the entrances into those caves, you are looking at hours of tight spaces, diving through dark, freezing waters, and God forbid you accidentally swim into one of the underground rapids. If that doesn't kill you, deep below the surface, you will find something not of this world. A creature that lies dormant beneath miles of dirt, water, ice, and stone. An entity waiting for someone dumb enough to go searching. Many scholars describe it as a shadow, but if you take the time to listen to those few who have survived an encounter, they speak as if the ice itself wishes to harm you. Any light source used reflects and shimmers off the surface of the ice, making you see things that are not there. It toys with you. Maybe you lose track of time. Maybe you forget which direction you took at the last fork. Maybe you're overly confident that you can squeeze yourself into the next cavern. What are the chances that this pool doesn't let out somewhere else? Surely there's a pocket of air down there somewhere. Surely there must be something at the bottom. Elf and Buried. Now, obviously, because of the trouble that I had from the last one, and I was very frustrated from that one, I decided to go in the complete opposite direction and just have way too much fun with this one. And I think maybe that was a good thing? It's hard to say. You guys probably aren't at the point through my sped up drawing footage here to see to what extent of insanity that I went to with this drawing. Because this is like a terrifying thing, right? Elf and Buried is already a very uncomfortable combination of words. But I wanted to go for a more kind of, obviously I wanted to do the Christmas elf, but I wanted to make it not the stereotypical elf. So I started there and was like, okay, what can I do with a horrific Santa elf-like creature? And obviously, because I'm a normal human and everyone else would have jumped to this idea immediately, the first thing I Googled was piranha. So I went to Google and I looked at a piranha's face, and I almost immediately just copied the design of the face from a piranha. Obviously, there's some changes. There's like a nose there. His mouth's a little different shape. I kept the weird, gross, open eye. And I went, okay, well, normally those hats are red, so what if its skin just naturally gradiates out into a red color? So so the Buried thing, I added more into his background and the writing prompt that I made for him as I was drawing. I came up with this idea as I was going. But I think it came out really good, and I think it's a very horrifying monstrosity that, obviously, I apologize for what I've done. The Gravelin, locally known as the Burial Elves. These creatures sleep during the day and become active at nightfall. They're not very strong on their own, so they tend to travel in packs. They have a minor understanding of crafting, being capable of creating crude clothing from pelts and leathers, and an instinctual urge to dig and burrow. They take advantage of the extensive labyrinth of caves and tunnels, allowing them to travel faster and more safely than if they were to travel on the surface. Despite their small stature, they are still quite effective at bringing down larger targets. deer, human, sometimes even bear. But the most horrific aspect of a burial elf is what gives it its name. These monsters do not seem to eat their prey. Only on rare circumstances do Gravelin hunt to feed themselves. Usually the small creature will use its claws and sharp serrated teeth to create large wounds in their target. After the prey is weakened to the point that it's incapable of fighting back, the Gravelin will drag the victim to a nearby wooded area and will use any weapons or tools they may have to dig a grave and bury their prey alive. And then they leave. Very, very few people have survived this experience, and we have yet to learn why they do this. Because the only signs that we've ever found of these rituals being done are leftovers from the victims who have survived. How many missing people do you think were just unlucky souls who came across the Gravelin? If no one had ever lived to tell the tale, I don't think we'd even know they existed. All right, guys, well, that is the first episode of this video series where we world build and draw some terrifying creatures. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe if you're interested in seeing more of this. If you have some ideas of what I could do differently or where you would like to see this go, please leave a comment below. You got some words specifically for the one that we did here, or some words for ones in the future. Maybe you got like a whole prompt ready to go and you just want to send it to see what I can come up with. That's cool. Please do that. But until then, thanks for watching the video. Really appreciate it. And I will see you guys on the next one.